Heartbeat wasn't just a show, it was a feeling. Behind the peaceful village and beloved characters were actors facing real-life struggles, illness, heartbreak, lost love, and quiet battles no one saw. In this video, we uncover the hidden truths and emotional journeys of the stars who made Heartbeat unforgettable. Geoffrey Hughes had a gift for comic timing and created some of the most beloved characters in British television, including Eddie Yates in Coronation Street and Onslow in Keeping Up appearances. On Heartbeat, he brought his larger-than-life charm to the role of Vernon Scripps, a lovable rogue with a twinkle in his eye. But behind the laughter was a long and painful battle with prostate cancer. In his final years, Hughes retreated to the Isle of Wight, where he found peace among nature, spending his days gardening and reading. He was a passionate environmentalist and supporter of rural preservation causes. His death at 68 was a shock to fans, but he left behind a legacy of warmth, humor, and unforgettable characters that continue to delight audiences. He remains a symbol of working-class comedy done with heart. The mischievous Claude Greengrass brought laughter and chaos to Heartbeat, but the man behind the role, Bill Maynard, carried burdens few fans ever saw. A lifelong entertainer with roots in stage, radio, and film, Maynard experienced a roller coaster of success and setbacks throughout his career. In his later years, he suffered from depression and faced serious financial difficulties, especially after leaving Heartbeat due to health issues. Yet he never lost his sense of humor and continued working into his 80s, even recording audiobooks and making occasional television appearances. Despite declining health, Maynard remained active in his community, attending charity events and speaking candidly about aging, fame, and survival. After his death, a small museum near his home began displaying memorabilia from his career, a touching tribute to a man who made Britain laugh for generations. William Simonds was the soul of steadiness on Heartbeat, playing the asthmatic yet endearing PC Alf Ventris with understated warmth. Off-screen, Simonds was a deeply private man who never married. Instead, he poured his energy into his passion's vintage cars, classical music, and long countryside drives. He was the sort of actor who never sought the spotlight but always gave his best in every role. As he quietly battled cancer in his later years, Simonds remained stoic, rarely speaking publicly about his illness. Friends recall his calmness, his sharp wit, and his refusal to let the disease define his final chapter. He passed away peacefully, leaving behind a legacy of loyalty and quiet strength, much like the character he portrayed. Derek Fowls was already a household name before Heartbeat, thanks to his iconic role as Bernard Woolley in Yes Minister. But it was as the no-nonsense Sergeant Blaketon that he became a fixture in British living rooms. Beneath his on-screen authority, however, was a man who faced immense personal hardship. Fowls went through a painful divorce and grappled with the emotional toll of fame in an era when vulnerability was rarely accepted for men in the public eye. Through it all, he remained a devoted father, cherishing his sons and maintaining a close bond with them throughout his life. His final years were marred by illness, heart failure, and pneumonia claimed his life, but he remained gracious and warm to the end. His passing was mourned by fans and peers alike who remembered his professionalism, humor, and generous heart. Peter Benson was one of those rare actors whose presence made every scene feel richer, even when he wasn't in the spotlight. As Bernie Scripps, the undertaker and garage owner with a heart of gold, Benson created a character loved by viewers of all ages. In real life, he battled a chronic heart condition that he kept well hidden from the public. He was soft-spoken, generous with his time, and deeply devoted to his family. When not working, he loved tending to his garden and collecting books on history and theater. Though his estate was modest, Benson left behind a wealth of goodwill and warm memories. Colleagues spoke of him as a consummate professional, reliable, kind, and quietly brilliant. Frank Middlemass had the kind of presence that made any scene feel more human, more grounded. With his gentle voice and comforting demeanor, he brought sincerity to every role, from Dr. Alex Ferrenby in Heartbeat to his tender portrayal of Rocky in As Time Goes By. Behind the camera, Middlemass led a quiet life. A lifelong bachelor, he spent his later years alone, often retreating into the warmth of antique shops and old book collections. He was a man of simple, joys fond of Shakespeare, black and white films, and conversation over tea. Though he lived modestly, his friendships in the acting community ran deep and loyal. As age crept in, his memory faded, and so did his public appearances. But those who knew him remember his kindness, his humor, and the quiet wisdom that came with a life spent listening more than speaking. When he passed in 2006, it marked the end of a long, dignified journey through British theatre and television. Freddy Jones, a true character actor, was instantly recognizable for his distinct voice and intense presence. His performances in The Elephant Man, Dune, and numerous BBC dramas marked him as a master of transformation. Yet, despite a long and impressive career, Jones chose a path of introspection after the passing of his beloved wife. In his twilight years, he rarely granted interviews. Instead, he surrounded himself with art, spending long afternoons painting or admiring pieces in his private collection. Acting was his vocation, but visual art was his therapy. His death in 2019 closed a chapter on one of the most versatile performers of his generation. Though never a celebrity in the traditional sense, Freddy Jones earned the love of colleagues and viewers alike through craftsmanship, humility, and unmistakable talent. His son, actor Toby Jones, carries on the legacy with equal grace. Francis Matthews exuded charm and intellect in everything he did, from voicing Captain Scarlet to starring in Dracula, Prince of Darkness, and the classic crime series Paul Temple. On Heartbeat, he added gravitas and warmth as Dr. James Alway, though by then, Matthews had already seen the full arc of a remarkable career. After the death of his wife, he quietly withdrew from public life. He moved to a small home filled with vintage cars and memories, driving his classic vehicles on country roads as a kind of meditative ritual. He no longer sought the limelight, but those who visited him found him warm, articulate, and always ready with a good story. Matthews' death in 2014 was a soft farewell from a man who once stood among giants of British television. His performances continue to resonate, elegant and full of quiet depth, just like the man himself. Stratford Johns was one of those rare actors who brought gravitas to every role, no matter how small. Best known to millions for his role as the stern but principled Inspector Barlow in Z-Cars and its spin-offs, Softly, and Barlow at Large, Johns later added another memorable role to his career, Cyril Isaiah Greengrass in Heartbeat. As the more serious and reserved brother of the mischievous Claude Greengrass, Johns brought quiet strength and emotional weight to the role, creating a believable contrast that deepened the show's family dynamics. Born in South Africa, Stratford carried with him a rich accent and a booming voice that made him impossible to ignore. His path to stardom wasn't easy, moving from continent to continent, often at odds with casting directors who found him too intense for certain television genres, but his talent was undeniable. He was an actor's actor, committed to exploring character depth over superficial charm. Despite his commanding screen presence and wide-ranging performances, Johns often found himself on the fringes of mainstream fame. Some say it was because he refused to compromise his political beliefs, which leaned strongly left, occasionally clashed with the industry's more conservative underpinnings. He also chose roles based on integrity rather than paycheck, a decision that impacted his finances in his later years. He continued to act until the final chapter of his life, even as illness began to wear him down. When he passed away in 2002 at the age of 76, it marked the end of an era for British television, a time when performance was about passion, purpose, and truth. Many who worked with him still speak of him with deep admiration and a quiet reverence. Stratford Johns wasn't just an actor, he was a force of nature, and British drama is richer because of him. To many, Brian Hibbert will always be remembered as Dan McCluskey, the tough but kind-hearted garage owner in Heartbeat. But beyond the Yorkshire village, Hibbert was a powerful figure in British pop culture. As the charismatic frontman of the Flying Pickets, his haunting lead vocals on their a cappella rendition of Yazoo's Only You reached #1 on the UK singles chart in 1983, giving voice to a generation living through economic hardship and political unrest. Before fame found him, Hibbert worked as a steelworker in Wales, surviving on grit and song in equal measure. When he finally took the leap into entertainment, he did so not just to entertain, but to sing for the working class. His music wasn't just melody, it was protest. His performances weren't just entertaining, they were a form of social commentary. His transition into acting was seamless. Hibbert had that rare magnetic presence that made every character feel lived in and authentic. Whether he was playing a dock worker, a cabbie, or a mechanic, he brought real humanity to his roles. And yet, behind the confident voice and contagious smile was a man wrestling with inner darkness. He battled alcohol abuse for years of struggle that nearly derailed his career more than once. Later, his diagnosis with thyroid cancer came as a devastating blow to both him and those who admired him. Even as his health declined, Hibbert kept creating. He continued to write songs, recording fragments of what would be his final works-unfinished tapes that still sit in archives, waiting to be discovered by those who want to hear his voice once more. He passed away in 2012 at age 65, far too soon for someone with so much left to say. Brian Hibbert was never just a performer, he was a storyteller, a rebel, and a man of the people. In every note and every scene, he spoke for those whose voices were often drowned out. His legacy isn't just musical or theatrical, it's personal, it's political, it's timeless. Mary Jo Randall was never one to chase the spotlight, she earned it, again and again, with performances that cut through the noise. In Heartbeat, she portrayed Joan Kirby, the no-nonsense publican with a steel spine and a kind heart, but Randall's talents extended far beyond a single role. From the Lakes to Bad Girls, she had a reputation for breathing complex life into tough, layered women who'd seen the world and weren't afraid to talk back to it. She brought raw emotion and fierce authenticity to every performance, often leaving audiences stunned by her ability to express power and pain in the same breath. Critics described her as unshowy but unforgettable, a description she'd likely have shrugged off with a modest grin. Off-screen, Randall was deeply aware of how the industry treated aging actresses. While roles for older women became scarcer, she became more vocal, more determined. She championed change, fighting for more inclusive scripts and mentoring young working-class talent, especially in the north of England. To those she helped, she wasn't just an acting coach, she was a lifeline. Many remember her as the woman who bought them their first train ticket to an audition, who edited monologues with them over tea, or who simply listened when no one else did. She lived simply in a humble home in Liverpool, its walls covered in theater posters, scripts filled with handwritten notes, and countless framed photos of the young performers she guided. Despite struggling with heart disease during her final years, she never let illness define her. When she died in 2017 at the age of 63, tributes poured in not just from co-stars, but from dozens of unknown names now working across British theater and television, all of them shaped by her fierce generosity. Mary Jo Randall may not have been a household name, but in the lives she touched in screen and off she was unforgettable. To most, James Mates was the calm, measured voice of ITV News' trusted correspondent who brought clarity in moments of crisis. But in a surprising twist, he briefly stepped into fiction with a short but impactful appearance as D.I. Shiner in Heartbeat. Though the role was minor, his presence was striking. He brought a subtle intensity, rooted in years of reporting from the real front lines of conflict and human drama. Mates' career as a journalist was nothing short of extraordinary. He covered wars, famines, political upheavals, and natural disasters with empathy and integrity, always putting people before headlines. He was admired by colleagues for his tireless pursuit of truth and by audiences for the humanity he brought to even the most devastating stories. Yet, behind the poised on-screen demeanor was a man deeply affected by what he witnessed. The demands of journalism took a toll, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. Mates often spoke about the hidden cost of bearing witness, the sleepless nights, and the quiet sorrow that came with reporting on human suffering. In 2020, he was diagnosed with lung cancer, a battle he met with characteristic stoicism and grace. Determined to make a lasting impact, James Mates spent his final years working with his family to establish a charitable foundation in his name. The foundation, dedicated to mentoring young journalists and supporting cancer patients, continues to operate today, a fitting legacy for a man who spent his life amplifying the voices of others. Though his time in Heartbeat was brief, his life story was one of courage, compassion, and relentless pursuit of truth. James Mates didn't just report the world, he changed it. When Gwen Taylor arrived on Heartbeat as the hilariously scheming Peggy Armstrong, she didn't just play the role, she lit it on fire. With her infectious energy, quick wit, and impeccable timing, she stole every scene she was in. Peggy was the kind of character audiences loved to roll their eyes at, always meddling, always scheming, but somehow impossible not to adore. Off-screen, Taylor's own story was one of perseverance, passion, and grit. Born in Derbyshire, she trained at the East 15 Acting School and quickly made a name for herself in classics like Duty Free, Barbara, and A Bit of Ado. Her versatility allowed her to move effortlessly between drama and comedy, stage and screen. But behind the laughs and accolades, Gwen faced a deeply personal struggle, the unraveling of her marriage to fellow actor Graham Reed. The separation was quiet and mutual, a casualty of years spent on different sets and in different cities. As she aged, Taylor refused to fade into retirement. She continued to act well into her 80s, even while quietly battling arthritis, a condition that often left her in pain but never out of spirit. Her colleagues recall how she would warm up with stretching exercises and smile through rehearsals, never wanting anyone to worry. It wasn't stubbornness, it was pride and a profound love for the craft. Now retired, Gwen lives in rural Wales in a cozy cottage tucked among the hills. Her days are slower, but far from idle. Surrounded by rescue dogs, stacks of books, and old scripts, she occasionally writes short stories and remains a patron of several small theater companies. She's known to pop into community productions and lend her voice to charity radio plays when asked. To fans, Gwen Taylor remains one of Heartbeat's most beloved late additions. But to those who know her best, she's something even rarer, a woman who aged on her own terms, defied expectations, and brought joy to generations without ever losing her spark. David Lonsdale will forever be remembered as the kind-hearted, slightly bumbling David Stockwell, a man who wore his heart on his sleeve and brought both comedy and humanity to Heartbeat's rural tapestry. First appearing in 1993, Lonsdale's portrayal struck a chord with audiences almost immediately. Stockwell wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but he was loyal, earnest, and endearingly sincere, a rare combination that made him the emotional glue of the show's lighter moments. Off-screen, Lonsdale was a different kind of man, thoughtful, grounded, and intensely private. Married to fellow performer Diana Lonsdale and a devoted father of 3, he often spoke in interviews about the delicate balancing act between national recognition and maintaining a quiet, stable home in Lancashire. Fame, he once said, was never the goal telling good stories was. Though he never became a household name outside Heartbeat, Lonsdale never stopped working. He dedicated himself to regional theater, where he found deep satisfaction in working closely with young actors and small audiences. He also became an outspoken advocate for mental health awareness, especially for men in working-class communities, drawing from personal experiences and conversations he had with fans across the years. In 2017, a serious car accident nearly ended his acting career. While he survived, the crash left him with chronic back pain and a renewed appreciation for life's quiet moments. He credits the incident with slowing him down in the best way, giving him time to reflect, create, and connect with people beyond the spotlight. As of 2025, Lonsdale lives modestly in Southport. He still performs in local plays and is a regular guest at fan conventions, where attendees are often moved to tears when meeting the man who made them laugh and cry for over a decade. Those close to him describe him as humble to a fault, never fully realizing how much joy he brought to millions. For fans of Heartbeat, David Stockwell may be a memory, but David Lonsdale's legacy lives on in every smile he brought and every story he still helps to tell. To the villagers of Aidensfield, Gina Ward was more than just a barmaid. She was the beating heart of the local pub, the confidant to many, and the woman who grew from cheeky waitress to trusted friend and matriarch over the course of Heartbeat's long run. Trisha Penrose portrayed Gina in over 300 episodes between 1993 and 2009, becoming not only one of the show's longest-serving characters, but also one of its most beloved. With her warm eyes and spirited charm, Penrose brought depth and evolution to a character that could have easily been one note. Viewers watched as Gina navigated love, loss, and unexpected motherhood, all while holding the pub and the community together. It was art imitating life. As Penrose herself matured, so did Gina, and audiences loved her all the more for it. Outside of Heartbeat, Trisha ventured into the music world in the early 2000s, releasing several pop singles. Though they didn't top the charts, they showcased a playful, confident side of her rarely seen on television. Her appearances on Celebrity Big Brother, Pointless Celebrities, and charity specials only further endeared her to the public, who appreciated her down-to-earth personality and easy laugh. But Penrose's life hasn't been without hardship. In 2015, her mother was diagnosed with lung cancer, a turning point that pushed Trisha into advocacy. She became a passionate supporter of the Roy Castle Lung Cancer Foundation, speaking openly about the emotional toll of caregiving and the importance of early detection. It was a deeply personal mission, and she's since helped raise thousands for the cause. Today, Trisha is semi-retired from the entertainment industry. She runs a boutique interior design company that reflects her creativity and eye for beauty, splitting her time between Cheshire and the Lake District. Those who know her say she's never lost her warmth. She still sends handwritten thank you notes to fans, attends Heartbeat reunions, and occasionally sings at local charity events. To the public, she'll always be Gina's vivacious woman behind the bar, but to those who know her best, Trisha Penrose is a survivor, a nurturer, and a quiet force of light in an often unforgiving industry.